So good afternoon all of you and welcome back to Excelsior Academy. So from now onwards we will be doing the Mole Bio Watson summary series. So the best book to study molecular biology is the Watson. Okay. So this is the first chapter, first lecture, and we are going to study about the DNA structures. The first basic things to study or to start molecular biology is to know about the DNA structure. Okay. So before we start, let us see what all we know about the DNA structure. So we know that it is antiparallel, right? Then what? It runs from 5' to 3'. You have got the phosphate group over here and OH group over here, right? Then what? It is complementary. It has got the complementary strands, right? Then what else? You can also tell. Then we have got the AT and GC base pairing is there. Then what else about DNA structure? Yes, anything else you would like to share?
Double helix.
Yes, correct. Double helix. Yes, that is the basic things. Double helix is there. So that's why we have 5', then 3'. The another one will be like this: 3', 5' is there. Yes. Then what else? Now, which region of DNA structure is highly hydrophobic in nature and hydrophilic in nature? So wherever the base stacking is present, like you have got the bases. Okay. So what are the bases over here? ATGC are your bases, right? So wherever base stacking is there, that region is your hydrophobic, and rest all the backbone of the DNA is hydrophilic. Now why it is hydrophilic? Because it is made up of phosphate and sugar, right? So it is hydrophilic, and this is enabling your DNA to be soluble in water. Okay, so it becomes water soluble. Okay, so there's one more thing. Suppose you're going for the interview, okay, and as sitting in the interview panel, I'm asking you a question that you have got the 3 test tubes are there, okay, and in each test tube, one is having protein, one is having DNA, and one is having the RNA. Okay, now without doing any biochemical test or without using any biophysical instruments, can you tell me which test tube is having protein, DNA, and RNA? This is a universal interview question. So whether you're going for BSc, MSc, or PhD, any interview, this question will come. Even if you go for your company job also. So there also this kind of question comes. Okay, so who can tell me the answer? So already for the protein I have mentioned in the last class. So how will you determine in which test tube either protein or DNA, RNA, what is present? Yes, anyone? Yes, Pratima, any idea? Can anyone tell? See, it's very simple. If you have got these test tubes, so what you can do is you are not allowed to do any biochemical or biophysical process, right? But you can shake it. So once you shake it, and if you see foam formation, so where do you see foam formation? In which case you will see the foam formation? In the case of
Protein.
correct. In the case
Protein.
of protein. Very good. So now you know out of these 3, let us say that first one was your protein. Okay. Now in the case of DNA and RNA. So this is very important because as such, if you see for the first look, it will look similar. Both will be looking the transparent, right? Now if you don't shake it, keep it undisturbed for some time, you can see something in the pellet. Okay. Here you will see something. So that will confirm the presence of DNA. Now, when you see nothing, then it is RNA. Okay, now this pellet will be something slimy or whitish, milkish, whitish color will be present on the bottom. So then it is your DNA. If nothing is seen, then it is RNA. And if suppose foam is present, then it is your protein. Okay. Chalo, let's start then our DNA structure topic. So we know that DNA is composed of polynucleotide chain and it is twisted around each other to form the double helix, right? Dear, 1 second. Okay, so as we were talking, DNA is composed of polynucleotide chain. So it will result in the formation of two nucleotide chain will be there. So it will result in the formation of double helix. Okay, so we all know the structure of double helix in the DNA. Now what will happen if you invert the DNA structure? Again, you're going to get the same, right? But will it give you the same sequence? Will it give it the same sequence even if you invert the structure? Are you getting the question?
Ma'am, please pardon this, ma'am.
Okay, so
I
see,
just
yes. So what happens is, see, as I said, please mute yourself, please. See, this is how your structures are there, right? 5 dash, 3 dash, and then you have got 3 dash, sorry, 5 dash and 3 dash, okay? So if suppose this is there, we know that DNA runs in 5 dash to 3 dash direction, right? Now, if I invert the structure, double helix looks superficially the same, right? Because of the complementary nature of the two DNA strands. Does it mean that the sequence is also going to be the same if I invert the structure? Now the question is clear. No? See, it's very simple, right? What you can do is you can just write it like this. AT, GC, CC, T, something is there. So this is one sequence has been given. Right? Now, if I invert the structure, what will happen? Am I
the
going?
sequence will change.
The sequence will?
Change.
Sequence will not be same.
Arey Baba. See, look it again. This is like this. Okay. Now I have inverted the structure. From this direction, I have made it this direction. Now tell me, the sequence is same or different?
Sequence is same.
Huh?
Ma'am, you want to know that if you read from 5 prime to 3 prime or 3 prime to 5 prime, whether the sequences will be same.
No, I'm saying my question is, see, the reading has to be, the sequence reading has to be in 5 prime to 3 prime direction. Okay. Now, if suppose this is the DNA, let us consider this sequence ATGCCT. Okay. So complementary strand I have written over here, A, G, G, whatever it is. Okay. Now the question is, if I invert the structure, this like entirely inverting the structure in this direction. Now the sequence is going to be the same or not? Asking. The reading from 5 prime to 3 prime is going to be same or not? This you have read once.
The same.
5 prime to 3 prime you have read. Now inverting the structure means this will come on the top. Let us say this is your 5 prime to 3 prime. Now the sequence are going to be the same or not? Yes? Okay.
No, it
I'll
will be the
repeat
same
once
because
again.
they are complementary, right?
They are
It will be the same because
complementary.
A. Yeah, see, because A to Z.
Let me write once again ATGC. Let us say some other sequence, whatever it is. Okay. So now I have complementary as TACGA TCG. Okay. Now tell me the reading from 5 prime to 3 prime on inverting the structure is going to be the same or not? Yes? Now also not clear?
No, ma'am.
See, it's very simple. If any structure is like this. Okay. One second. If the structure is like this, I have just made it like this. Now the question is whether the sequence is going to be same or not. The answer is no. Okay. And that's why your genes when it is read in another direction, it gives the another protein, or sometimes it doesn't express itself. Okay. Now it is clear.
Okay.
So we know that in DNA we have got the double helix structure is there, complementarity is there. Okay, major and minor groove is also there. Okay. Now moving on. So nucleotide formation. So we already know how the nucleotides are formed. So it has got the base, sugar, and phosphate group is there, right? Now what all bonds are present? Glycosidic bonds are present and
Phosphodiester.
Yes. So in which and all positions the bonds are formed?
At C5 prime and
Yes.
C3 prime.
Yes. And this is what we need to remember. What position in the purines it is being used, and in the pyrimidine, what position it is being used during the bond formation. Okay. So this and all you can read later. So this is important. So once you know at what position, so this is your N1 position, and in the case of pyridine, your N6 position. Sorry, 9 position, right? So in that way, you have to remember the nucleotide formation. As such, nobody is going to ask the structure, but the positions of the carbon and nitrogen, which is involved in the formation of the bond. Okay. Now, so here what is happening? So there is a loss of water. Called loss of water in a chemical reaction. What is the name of the chemical reaction when there is a loss of water?
Condensation reaction.
Very good, very good. It is called condensation reaction. So there is loss of water here also. So you can see that a bond is formed. Okay. Now, what do you call this bond and what do you call this bond formation over here? So this is your glycosidic bond. Okay. And this one is your
Phosphodiester.
No, it is phosphomonoester. Monoester. It is one, right? Now, when it is attached to the another over here, then it becomes diester. Okay. So these are small things, but important to understand. So this is how your nucleotide is formed. So you have got the adenine as your purine over here. Then what happened? A ribose sugar is added. So we know in the case of DNA, it is deoxyribo, right? And then a phosphate group is added to form a complete nucleotide formation. Now, what is important to remember in this slide is the molecular weight. Okay. So 331.2 is the molecular weight for the ATP. Correct. Now, in the same way, we have got the GTP also, UTP also, then TTP is there, CTP is there. So overall, the average weight has been taken around 330 Dalton. Yes.
And the voice was not clear, ma'am, before.
Okay. Now it's clear, right? So what you have to remember is that all the nucleotide, the average weight we have taken is 330. Okay. In the same way, for your protein, have taken the average weight of each amino acid as 110 Dalton, right? In the same way, for the nucleotide, it is 330 Dalton. Now, this is for one. Now, if suppose the base pair is given, one base pair is given. So, what will be the weight then? 660
330 by 10.
By 10. No. One base pair means two nucleotides are there, right? So one base pair means two nucleotides are there. So on an average, it will be around 650 Dalton, because the hydrogen bonds are formed and also there also will be loss of water. So that's why the value will become from 660 to 650 Dalton. So again, I'm repeating, what you have to remember is one nucleotide weight is 330 Dalton and one base pair weight is around 650 Dalton. Now this you need to remember, because in future, whenever we are doing all the numericals, the problems, you have to consider the molecular weight over here. Okay. So keep on making short notes also, where you can write and keep in mind also. Okay. Okay, so this is how your the DNA double helix is formed. So whatever just now we have discussed, the bond formation between the sugar and the base, then the bond formed between the sugar and the phosphate, it has been discussed over here. So this is how the structure looks like. So in the DNA, we know that it is going from here to here, 5' to 3', and then in this case, it is from here. Okay, so these are very basics. Now DNA polarity. So whenever there is a direction is there, okay, like in this case, in the case of DNA, we have mentioned about the 5' and 3'. So because of this, there is a polarity is there, okay. Now this polarity is defined as the symmetry of the nucleotides, asymmetry of the nucleotides. Now why it is called asymmetry? Because in whichever direction you cut the DNA, it is not going to overlap with the same, right? So that's why it is asymmetrical in nature. Now DNA have got free 5' phosphate at one end and free 3' OH at the another end. So this also we know. So that's why how we write, it is written as 5' to 3' whenever we write about DNA. And in the case of protein, it is always from N terminal to C terminal. Okay. So in the case of protein also, you have got the polarity. What about sugars? Do sugars have the polarity or lipids? Any idea? Yes? Yes, Mahima. Do they have polarity, lipids and sugars? They
No,
don't.
ma'am.
Very good. They don't have any polarity. Yes. Now, each base has its own preferred tautomeric form. Now, this is important. So we know that the DNA, they are flat, they have got the heterocyclic rings and they are made up of carbon and nitrogen. Yes, purines and pyrimidines are there. So in which we know that purines are A and G, adenine and guanine, pyrimidines are cytosine and thymine, right? So this is how they are formed, the N1 of the pyrimidines and N9 of the purines. Yes, initially we said the opposite. It is the N1 of the pyrimidines and the N9 of the purines. Okay, so what are the forms, the structures over here? If you can remember, it's well and good, but as such not required for the exam level. But for the BSc students, it is important to remember the structure. Okay. Now each of these bases, they exist in their alternative form. Now why they are present in the alternative forms, like why there is two forms of each base? Can you tell me? Even though it is said that in nature it is present in the equilibrium form, but why there are two forms present in the nature? Yes, any idea? Anyone? Is the question clear? Yes, is the question is clear to everyone? See, what I was saying is, we said that the bases are existing in the two tautomeric forms. Okay, so one is keto, the other is enol, the one is amino, the other one is imino. Now, why? The question is why in nature they are existing, even though we are using only one form in the formation of DNA. So why there are two forms existing, even though only one is preferred over the other? So why in nature it is present in the two forms, and then they are saying that it is present in the equilibrium with each other. And always remember, nature doesn't select anything in random. Always there is a reason for the existence of any molecule, even for us also. Okay. Yes. Now can you understand?
And maybe the selected which is in equilibrium form, that is most thermodynamically stable.
See, whatever it is, but still it is present in the two forms, right? So one is stable, okay, I agree, one is more stable than the other. But what is the role of the another one? See, it's like kind of thing, if you have got good, the other things will be bad also, right? So everything has to be in equilibrium. So each existing molecules needs to have certain kind of role. So the role is that, see, already we know that there are two forms are there. So purine and pyrimidines are there. So there are, in the case of purines, amino group, that is the NH2 group is present on the purines, is in equilibrium with the imino part. Okay, that is NH group. I'll show you the structures in the next slide. They are in equilibrium. Okay, now the thing is, the question is why it is present. The thing is that these forms, sometimes what happens is, because of certain radiations or because of the presence of certain chemical, these amino get converted into imino, and this conversion results in the mutation. Okay, now this mutation, depending on the condition or depending on the environmental condition, it can be either useful or harmful. Okay, so you know that mutations can be beneficial or it can be lethal, right? So that's why the other form is also existing. It's because of the certain radiations or the chemicals or whatever the reasons which results in the mutation of these bases, and because of which they have got the other forms. So in the nature, wherever the DNA formation is taking place, the maximum form is the amino group or the keto form. Okay, and rarely you can see the imino formation or the keto enol formation. Are you getting the point over here? The importance of tautomeric forms over here. See,
Yes, ma'am.
this is the structure. So amino is a, imino is a. So in the solution, it will be present in the equilibrium. But whenever it is required for the DNA formation, then it is the amino form and the keto form. Okay. So amino form of your cytosine, keto form of your guanine. So all these are used for your DNA formation. Now, if suppose by chance it is coming in the imino or the enol form, what will happen? There are chances that it will undergo the mutation process. Okay. Now, so the two strands of the double helix, they wound each other in an antipolar orientation. And because of this only, it is possible to have hydrogen bonding possible between the two bases. So we know that between the adenine and thymine, there are two hydrogen bonds. And whereas in the case of guanine and cytosine, there are three hydrogen bonds. You can see the structure over here. Now, you need to remember also how the hydrogen bonds are formed. So if you see the structure over here, it is the first one is the N1, then you have got the C2 and C6, and here it is 2, 3, 4. Same over here also, there are 2, 1 and 6 and 3 and 4. So only these numbers, if you can remember, is also more than enough. Now please remember the structure, because again in next slides we are going to study why there is not possible the hydrogen bond between A and C or G and T. Okay. So we know that it is AT base pairing and GC base pairing, but why in nature AC and GT base pairing is not possible? So can anyone tell me now why it is not possible? Even though both purines and pyrimidines are present, they also have the nitrogen and oxygen, and they can also form the hydrogen bond. But why it is not possible to form between AC and GT? Any idea? It is because of the structure. The problem is that I'll tell you here itself. Later also again we can study, no problem. See, in this case you can see that to the carbonyl oxygen, nearby amino group is coming. So you have got the hydrogen bond acceptor and donor as well as, right? Together it is there. Here also you have got the H and N is there. Then again H and O is there, correct? Similarly in the case of here also. But once you align A and C, the problem is that both amino group comes together. So in case of A, you have got the amino group present over here. So what will happen? Both hydrogen bond acceptor is coming together and donor is coming together. Are you getting the point? It is not the combination of acceptor and donor. It is the combination of acceptor and donor. And that's why the hydrogen bond is not able to form. Okay. So here we have got N instead of NH in the case of adenine. So what will happen? N over here, N over here. Then again, it is not going to form. So this is one of the reason why in nature A, C and G, T hydrogen bonds we don't see in nature. Okay. Now the two chains of the double helix have complementary sequence. Yes, this we know, and this is because of the Watson-Crick rules are there. So it derives from the complementarity, both of the shape and hydrogen bonding properties. So this is one of the reason also that it can form 3 over here, and it can form 2 in the case of AT. Okay. So this is the reason. So this numbering and all you need to remember. There's nothing else to explain over here. Okay, so now double helix is stabilized by base pairing and base stacking. So this is important. So we know that DNA is more stable as compared to the existence of RNA and protein. Right now, why it is more stable? One of the basic reason is the hydrogen bonds. Okay, so now how it is making stable, how it is making your DNA stable is that, see, when you have got the DNA like this, we know that to the backbone your water molecules are present, okay, and they are making the interactions, whereas this portion is your hydrophobic, right? Already mentioned. Now what happens if it is separated, single ones are there? So what will happen? It will be covered totally by the water molecules. Okay, so this is what is written. So when polynucleate strands are separate, water molecules are lined up on the bases, and when they come together, the double helix, the water molecules are displaced from the bases. Now all these things creates the disorder and increases the entropy, and thereby it stabilizes the double helix. So you know that increase in entropy, what will be the delta G then? If there is an increase in entropy, what about the delta G? Gibbs free energy?
Negative.
Very good. And negative means spontaneous, right?
Spontaneous, yes.
Yes. So it will stabilize the double helix. Okay. If suppose it was not increasing the entropy and the delta G was positive, it means what? You have to provide the external energy from outside to stabilize the double helix. So then it won't be spontaneous. Then it won't be soluble in the water. Okay. So these are the reasons why your DNA is soluble in water. So this is one of the another interview question, like what makes DNA soluble in water. So now is it clear? So with respect to chemistry, you just have to talk about the delta G. That is your Gibbs free energy. Is it clear? The solubility of DNA in water? Or should I repeat? Okay, so all these are written. Then second thing, so first thing is about the hydrogen bond, which makes your DNA stable. The second thing is about the base stacking. So what is the base stacking doing? So as you know, the structure is having the turns. In each turn, we have got the bases like this, right? So they have got the stack arrangement. The staircase arrangement is there. Now, why this staircase arrangement is helping in maintaining the structure? Because of the electron cloud interactions, and that will make your double helix more stable. Okay, so these stack bases are attracted to each other by induced dipoles between the electron clouds, and this is nothing but your van der Waals interactions. So including the hydrogen bond as well as your base stacking is helping in stabilizing the DNA structure. Okay. And now the base stacking also contributes to the stability of the double helix, the hydrophobic effect. So already mentioned that the interior of the DNA is hydrophobic in nature, right? So these hydrophobic surfaces are buried by base stacking in the double helix and minimizing the exposure to the surface area where more water molecules will be there, hence lowering the free energy of the double helix. So lowering the free energy means making it more negative. Okay. Now, hydrogen bonding is important for the specificity of base pairing. So this is what I was talking about, why there is no hydrogen bond formation between the adenine and the cytosine. So what do you see in the structure? You see that over here, again, the hydrogen bond donor are present and here acceptor are present. So what is happening? It is not possible to form the hydrogen bond, right? And here the distance is very far, and this is not the acceptor over here. So you see that not even one or two, not even one hydrogen bond can be formed. Leave about the 2 or 3 hydrogen bonds, and that's why the base pairing between A and C is not possible. Now it is clear with the structure, like why the hydrogen bonds are not present between the A and C, and why it is specific the bond formation between adenine and thymine and guanine and cytosine. I think it's clear, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is important. So these are the answers to your all questions. So what I have taken is we already know about the double helix DNA structure, the basic things we know, but why it is like that is the answer to this, is the answer from this video. Okay, so all these what I have taken is basically we asked during the interview. So when I was at IISER Pune, so when students come for the PhD entrance or the integrated PhD joining, so these are the basic questions we ask, like why it is ATGC, why not ACGT? So these are the answers you have to give. Okay. Okay, now the question is how it was determined that the DNA helix has got 10.5 base pairs per turn of the helix. So this was done with the help of the experiment. So in the experiment, what the people have done is, so there was the surface they have taken, okay, the mica surface, and on the surface they have taken the DNA. So what happens, because of the charges present on the DNA surface, the backbone, it got bind to the mica surface. Now what they have done is, they have used DNase 1, okay, the enzyme. So this enzyme is able to cleave the DNA molecules at the phosphodiester bonds. So what will happen is, suppose you have got these DNAs are present and then it is cleaving at the phosphodiester bond. Now also one thing you need to remember is that many of the enzymes are able to cleave the DNA at the major groove only and not at the minor groove. Can you give me the reason for this? I repeat, many of the enzymes are able to cleave, or they have got the catalytic activity by binding to the major groove of the DNA and not at the minor groove. So what will be the reason behind this? Anyone? It is because of the conformation of the DNA. So it is not possible for the enzyme. So enzymes are very bulky in nature, right? So they can only bind to the surface where it is possible, where it is exposed. Minor grooves are very small. So it is not possible for the catalytic site to reach the minor groove or to reach the phosphodiester bonds which are present in the minor groove. So what will happen? It is not able to cleave. So in order to cleave the DNA, it has to have the access, the catalytic site to, it should reach the phosphodiester bond, right? To have the cleavage. So because of this, many of the enzymes, not only the DNAs, the other enzymes also, they act on the major groove and not at the minor groove. Okay. So because of the enzyme, because the enzyme is bulky, it is able to cleave the phosphodiester bonds only on the DNA surface, which is far from the mica, because of the steric difficulty of the reaching the sides of bottom of the DNA. Now, in this case, since DNA is attached like this, so this region, suppose this is a mica, this region is attached, right? So here the enzymes do not have any access. So wherever it is having the major groove, at that region that DNAs are making the cut. So now what they have done, they have taken all these fragments of the DNA and they run into the gel electrophoresis. Now you know that in gel electrophoresis, the lengthy bands will come on the top and the smaller fragments will come in the bottom, right? So, and we also know that DNA is negatively charged, so it will run from cathode to anode, right? Now, so when you analyze the fragments, they saw that all the lengthy fragments are on the top and smaller fragments are on the bottom. Now, when they calculated the length of these, so they found that every time it is the multiple of the 10.5 base pairs. Okay. So this is how they came to know that each turn. Okay. So there are 10.5 base pairs are present in the helix whenever the DNA is making a turn. So let's go through what we have got the information in the slides now. So the value of 10 base per turn varies somewhat under different conditions. Okay, so you have got different types of DNA also, so the number will vary and also the condition will vary because the pH also affects, the high salt concentration affects everything. So now the DNA are adsorbed on the mica surface. Short segments of DNA were allowed to bind on the mica surface. The presence of 5 terminal phosphates on the DNAs are held in a fixed orientation on the mica. Now these mica-bound DNAs were exposed to the DNase 1, which cleaves the phosphodiester bonds. Now this also we have discussed. So wherever it was possible for the DNAs to go and cleave, so there were cuts were made, okay? And the region which was farther from the mica, only there the enzyme is able to make the cut. Now, this is how it looks. So you have got the mica surface and the DNA is there. So you can see that DNA is making a cut wherever you can see the major groove is present. Okay. So when they run the gel electrophoresis, you see that they got these number of the fragments. And when they calculated, we found that it is always the multiples of the 10.5 base pairs. Okay. So resulting fragments were separated by the electrophoresis. So we know that DNA is negatively charged. It migrates from cathode to anode, that is towards the positive charge. And the gel matrix impedes movement of the fragments in a manner that is proportional to their length. Okay, so it means what? It means that the larger fragments will migrate slowly and smaller fragments will migrate faster. And when they did the experiment, they found that it is the average or the multiples of the 10.5. So this is how it was calculated that DNA has got 10.5 base pairs per turn of the helix. Okay, is it clear to everyone? Okay, so thank you for listening.